Hi, everyone. Welcome. I am going to go ahead and launch a poll for you guys so you can answer that poll when it pops up for you. And I'm just going to go ahead and give a couple of introductions while you guys are answering the poll question. My name is Lisa. If you were in the last elementary session, welcome back. For anyone new, I am an elementary curriculum developer with CodeHS Elementary. So that means I work on and develop a lot of our elementary lessons. A couple of things for you to know while you are in this session today. You guys are all muted, so just make sure that you stay muted throughout the session. Also, we do have a Q&A open while you guys are in this session. If you have any questions for the presenter or about CodeHS Elementary in general, go ahead and pop those questions into the Q&A. We will get those answered as soon as we can. You can also utilize the chat for any discussions during the session, answering presenter questions, or just spreading good vibes. The chat is open also. Okay, so welcome. We've got a lot of people here and joining. The results of the poll. So the question is, which animal can see behind itself without turning its head? It looks like this one was a stumper because the correct answer is the one that the least amount of people chose. The rabbit can actually see behind itself without turning its head. All of these other animals do have to turn their head in order to be able to see behind. So awesome. Thank you guys for participating in the chat. And I'm going to pass it off now to Krista, who is going to present this session called ScratchJr and Literacy Skills for Emerging Readers. So go ahead, Krista.
Thanks, Lisa. So I kind of wanted to start this session. I kind of wanted to share a little bit about how I got started with coding and teaching elementary students to code, and then ending up at CodeHS. So maybe you're different from me, but I did not go to school to teach children how to code. That was not my background. I was working in an elementary school. I was a keyboarding instructor, and I got voluntold that I would be teaching children how to code. And no experience whatsoever, never coded anything in my life. Had vaguely heard of it, but that's kind of it. So the background behind this is the state I'm in came out with a mandate that said, hey, all students K through 12 need to learn computer science. And my school came to me, my principal was like, guess that who's gonna do that? And I was like, okay, we got this. So we kind of looked at some different things. We talked to some schools, neighboring schools, to find out what they were doing. And we went on a little field trip. So we took a bunch of teachers and went to a school that was teaching computer science, and they were using CodeHS. And we went into some classrooms to kind of get a feel for how this would work. And when we went in there, I saw some pretty cool stuff. Something that really stood out to me more than just the coding or anything else, and Robin talked about this in her session, was that these students were not afraid to try hard things. They were not afraid to fail, to make mistakes. And that really stood out to me. So they would be coding and they'd be like, oh, it's not working. What can I do to fix it? And they had that growth mindset. And so that really impressed me. And I was like, my students need that, because so often, I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but the students are like, nope, too hard. I don't want to do it. And then they just give up. And so I was like, this is what elementary students need. So that's kind of where I got started, and it kind of progressed from there. And I eventually ended up teaching coding exclusively as a class, and I loved it. It was so great. And then I was able to jump in with CodeHS, and it's been so fun to see how the platform has changed and meeting the needs of elementary teachers. So that's kind of a little bit about how I got started. I'm really passionate about all kids should learn to code. All kids should have that experience and be able to explore with it and develop those skills that Robin talked about. And as part of that, though, as elementary teachers, there's not a lot of time to exclusively teach coding. And so when you can make those cross-curricular connections, that really helps, and you can bring in both at the same time. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do today and kind of look through kind of our objectives and what I hope you're able to get out of the session. So we'll talk a little bit about ScratchJr. What is ScratchJr? How can it foster these early literacy skills? And then we'll talk a little bit about hands-on strategies. So I'm curious, just throw in the chat if you've ever used ScratchJr. Or not, whether it's with CodeHS or not. I'd love to know kind of like, where are we at with, have you heard of it? Is it something brand new to you? Things like that. That'll kind of help guide me. So let me pull up the chat. Yep, seeing a lot of people who've used it. Awesome. So that's good. So I don't need to Scratch and ScratchJr. Perfect. Excellent. So glad to hear that we're not starting from scratch, and that we kind of know. So we'll kind of go through this a little bit. As you guys know, then ScratchJr. really simplified visual programming language for young students, really kind of recommending age maybe 4 through 7, but definitely those are flexible ages as well. And it teaches students how to learn coding concepts through really creating interactive stories, games, animations. It's set up in such a way that students can really be as creative as they want. And it helps them before they've maybe developed skills such as writing, that they're able to kind of express themselves. So that's something I love about it. The drag and drop blocks are very user friendly. For the most part, I know there's some frustrations when students first get on the platform and they're trying to develop those mouse skills, and that's kind of a struggle sometimes, but it's a good struggle. It helps them develop that hand-eye coordination. It's good practice for them. We definitely recommend device-wise that you give your students a mouse. For ScratchJr., it's a lot simpler than if they're trying to use a trackpad. That can be a little more tricky for sure. So anyway, this just allows them to really express themselves. It's kind of laid out in a story format. We use the term characters, but also sprites kind of interchangeably there. So there's really, the way it is laid out is very familiar to kids. They're adding characters, they're adding settings, there's pages they can add. So very easy to use layout. All right, so something I love about ScratchJr. is that it allows a safe environment for students to explore and fail. We kind of talked about this a little bit. Robin talked about this a little bit. Sometimes, students get these, even at young ages, it amazes me that, oh, I'm not good at this. I'm not good at that. But when they start coding at a young age and nobody's been exposed to this before, they all start at the same level and they're able to kind of, work in a little bit of, oh, I'm learning this. We're all learning this together. And so it really provides that safe environment for them. It's kind of a low stakes exploration that really fuels creativity and perseverance. I will say there is some criticism that maybe we're putting students on screens too much already. That is a fair criticism. There's, sometimes we're like, oh, it's too much. But here's the thing, they're almost born with iPads. They're almost handed iPads when they're born, right? The district I worked in, we had a saying that said, code or be coded. So I think when we're able to make them active creators in the process rather than passive consumers, it gives our students that skill set to be able to kind of make good decisions about digital consumerism. Are they just sitting and playing a game for hours in, the clicker games? My students love the clicker games and they just kind of click through and they're just kind of passively consuming, or are they able to do something a little more creative and it's stimulating different areas of their brain? It's developing different skills. So I think there's an argument to be made that even the littlest can code and it's okay. Obviously, boundaries important, making sure time isn't spent too much. But in my classroom, at least, I know that students were like, I want to get on Scratch. I want to get on ScratchJr. And I would much rather them do that than play, some other game, because I feel like it was more beneficial for them. They're practicing those skills. They're being creative. It's more of an active process. So with all things balanced though, and there's also some really great unplugged activities that you can incorporate with coding concepts and different lesson plans. All right, so the main takeaway from this I want from the slide is it's not too hard for littles. Even kindergartners can code. It's going to look different and be scaffolded different across grade levels, and that's to be expected. But even the kinders can begin that drag and drop process. It builds those skills. It's great. I loved teaching kindergarten how to code because their minds were just so full of energy and excitement for it, and they wanted to explore. And I think if we can foster that at a young age, I think it's an awesome thing to do. So love that. So let's dive in a little bit more now to literacy skills and kind of what that looks like using a digital storytelling platform. So there's been a lot of research done on this because, like anything with education, we want to know what are the effects of this? How is this affecting our students? Is it effective? So the research is pretty positive so far on this. There's been a lot of studies that say coding and computational thinking are now being recognized as literacy skills. They share some common elements with common literacy skills like sequencing, structure, and meaning making, empowering. This really empowers students to kind of move through their creations and see this. So if you look at the structure of it, it's very similar to a book. When you're going to have your beginning, your middle, your end. And I would tell my students this all the time. Would it make sense if you started reading a book at the end and then jump to the beginning and then jump to page 562 and back to page 3? It wouldn't make sense. And that's kind of inherent in coding as well. That structure, that sequence, that's one of the core computational thinking skills, is understanding sequence. And so really they go hand in hand. And what's interesting about this is sometimes students maybe aren't excited about reading. I saw this a lot where they I don't like to read, I don't like math, I don't like that sort of thing, but they love to code. They love to get on ScratchJr. So that's something that was a win there. Classroom engagement gets really high when you start bringing out fun, interactive things like this. And it's almost like sneaking your veggies in, right? Like into a smoothie or something, because you're able to have this fun environment, but then also cover the standards and material that you need to. So the benefits are being very well documented, that it's very similar between the structure between reading skills and coding skills, and there's a lot of transferability there. A really neat benefit that's also coming out of this that's being researched is that ESL students are actually, Amira, I love the broccoli there in the chat. Eat your veggies, right? It's good for you. So it's been shown that ESL students are benefiting from this because ScratchJr is actually very much language neutral. So because it's icon based, students are able to kind of make meaning from those icons and understand regardless of language. And so this helps them kind of develop that. It fosters that for ESL students as well. It helps them improve their vocabulary and sentence structure. So there's tons of research. When I was preparing for this, I could have put probably 5 or 6 more slides of all the different research that's around about the benefits of teaching children these computational thinking skills, about how it fosters literacy skills, but that would be really boring to read through. So I didn't do that. But no, it's out there. There's lots of documentation. If you're trying to get this to your school and you need to convince an admin or something, there is a ton of documentation that supports this. So now let's kind of dive a little deeper in. So let's talk about the specific skills and how ScratchJr can foster this. So phonemic awareness is the ability to recognize and manipulate individual sounds, the phenoms. So when you're speaking, it's hearing those sounds and breaking those down. So again, that decomposition is another CS concept that is very prevalent. You're looking at a big problem and you're breaking it into individual small steps. And so they're very complementary to each other. This is really helpful. We have microphone tools within ScratchJr. I will give a little bit of caution there. The students love the microphone, so you need to maybe set up some classroom management around that. But they love to hear those sounds, and you can record them and send them to your students, and we'll go into some lesson plans of how to do that. But the microphone tools are very helpful for that. It helps them hear it. It helps the repetition of that. Sequencing and narrative structure is kind of the arrangement of events in a story. And as I said, when you're reading a story, you start at the beginning, you go to the middle, you go to the end. It's very natural that way. Coding is the same way. Sequence matters. And so your code needs to have a beginning, a middle, an end, especially when we're talking about retell abilities. This is really helpful for that. And we'll dive into that in some lesson plan ideas. But it's important to realize that the overall framework and structure of the story is kind of being able to be mimicked in ScratchJr. Letter recognition. So there's some really cool ways we're going to go through this. Students have the ability to type and label things in ScratchJr, which is helpful. They have a drawing tool. They can explore with that. It's really neat. And then story comprehension. Within their programs, you'll find often students are creating narratives. They're creating a story that they're taking it from their mind and putting it onto the computer screen, and they can focus on different details such as characters and setting and structure. So it really helps cement that in their mind and get them thinking about that as well. All right, I'm going to take a drink of water. I'm losing my voice here, so. But if you have any questions, feel free to throw them out in the chat. Anything you want to discuss, we can go through that as well. So let's kind of dive even deeper now into this. So visual storytelling is kind of the basis behind ScratchJr. It enables children to use images and characters and movement to create this before they fully develop their writing or drawing skills. You're talking about, 5-year-olds that maybe, spelling, grammar, things like that, that's not inherent to them yet, but they're able to explore those skills in a virtual environment, which is kind of a really neat thing. They don't have to have those vocabulary or artistic skills yet to fully express themselves. This gives them a tool to voice their creativity. And that fosters even more creativity when they have that success in doing that. I was always so surprised with what my students would come up with. It would be so cool to see them recreating scenes from their favorite movie or their favorite book and seeing how they interpret it. It was fun to see their original creations, and they're gonna go to the moon, and they're going to have a pizza party on the moon, and then go scuba diving with their best friend who's a cow that can talk. They would have all sorts of really exciting creative things. I think when we foster that, it generates more creativity. So I think that's a really great way to do that. And then the tools that are given within ScratchJr really enable students to bridge kind of the oral and written language because they can record their voice. They can type out their story, more advanced. If we're talking more of a second grader, they can start to kind of understand the computer more and type out what they're thinking. So that kind of helps develop those early writing skills. Yeah, and it just kind of makes sense. They learn to speak before they write. So it kind of follows this natural progression, kind of building upon those skills as they're able to express themselves. So sequencing and comprehension, we've talked a lot about that. Sequencing is very inherent to computer science, to learning how to code. And it's that storytelling, right? When children are able to sequence blocks in ScratchJr, they practice this logical order, which is really essential for their coding and their reading comprehension. So something I would always love to do with students is kind of break down what do they want their program to do. And so what I would do is I'd say, okay, let's take it step by step and break it out. And they tell a story as they go. My favorite activity to do at the beginning of the year would be to, okay, guys, you're going to give me directions to walk over to my classroom door. And they would learn how specific they need to be. It really helps them drill down into details. And they tell me, okay, go forward and turn left. And I'm like, so I just keep going forward one step and turn left. And they're like, no, didn't get there. And we go through. And it's the same thing when they're doing any sort of coding or story. They're looking at, okay, this is the first step. This is what had to happen before this happens. So really exploring that cause and effect is really helpful. And you can really see kind of the parallels between coding and storytelling there. So research is showing that kind of sequencing can really improve their comprehension and recall. And I know that's a huge thing when we're testing their reading. We ask them to do it, give us a retell. Can they remember this many details? Can they remember what the setting was, what happened? So really kind of that connection there is being strengthened. And then they develop vocabulary and expression. They can label their scenes. They can add short blurbs of text or dialogue to their characters. And this really all reinforces those early literacy skills. So I want to now take a moment and kind of give you guys some ideas, some basic ideas of lesson ideas, how to incorporate this directly into your classroom. All the lesson ideas that I'm going to go through are aligned to ELA standards. So it's all stuff that will need to be covered anyway. And so, like I said, it's kind of like sneaking those veggies in. It's getting the fun, the excitement, but also doing it in a way where you're still covering and reinforcing those concepts. And they don't even realize that they're learning these fun things. I think sometimes that's a great way to go about learning, is that intrinsic learning that happens as you go instead of explicitly saying this is what to do. When they explore it and learn it for themselves, I feel like it's really beneficial. So this is a CodeHS lesson that can be taken and customized in a lot of different ways. So it's exploring letter sounds. And so this can be adapted if you have older students that they're having an easier time manipulating the mouse. You could give them more freedom to create their own letters and sounds. Or if you're structuring this for very young children that maybe don't have as much experience, you can give them this lesson already pre-done with the sounds in it to explore. Kind of depends on where your students are at and what your timeline is for how much time you're able to dedicate to program creation and then program exploration as well. So the basics behind this is that they have these characters that all have different sounds attached to them. So when they click on the T, they have their control block here, and then their recorded sound that would make the T sound, and then they can add a fun animation if they want. So that when they click on it, they're able to hear that sound. So again, we're bridging that kind of visual and oral language with the sounds. They're understanding the phenoms behind it. It's really great. So what they can then do is then build words. So that's kind of the next step in it. They can explore the sounds, and then they can build the word and move things around and manipulate it how they want. And then you could do this as an interactive activity as well, where you as the teacher are saying the sound and then they have to mimic it with the mouse and click the same sounds and make sure they're getting the same thing. So, or you could do it as a spelling activity where you're going to go, we are going to spell out the word bot. Can you find those letters? Can you arrange them? You could put them in pairs and have them work that way. Have them, face each other with their computer screens away and say, I'm thinking of this word and spelled B-O-T. Can you find those and have them play the sound out for each other? So there's lots of different creative ways you can make this an interactive activity as well. So you could then encourage them to create their own activities or their own characters and add additional letters to the program. So that's one way that really works on the letter sounds. The next step then would be kind of moving on. We can make it more complicated. There's digraphs, so very similar concept, just a little more advanced. And you can make it fun. You can make them hide. There's hide and show blocks, so you could make them hide all of them except for the sound you want. Play a hide and seek game with it. So there's some fun ways to do that as well. And again, you could incorporate the group activity or in pair programming. Pair programming is a great way if you pair up your students, especially you can be strategic in the pairs you make and maybe higher and lower abilities together to kind of learn from each other is really great. When your students are able to explain, when your higher ability students are able to explain their thinking process, it helps them solidify that knowledge when they are able to teach. Or as well, if your lower students are able to kind of learn from a peer, it's kind of a safe environment to do that. So they can click on the sounds and kind of make different combinations. Again, you could do it in lots of different ways. It's a neat way to do that. And then Robin mentioned you have the ability within the CodeHS platform now to push out projects that you've created. So if you have specific spelling words you're working on or specific things that you want to focus on, you can create a project similar to this and push that out to your students as well. Share it with their section so that they can take it and then customize it as well. This has always been one of my favorite ones, the build a sentence. This is, again, a similar concept. You're using the microphone in a way that they can hear those sounds. It's great. Definitely recommend headphones in any classroom with this, because otherwise you'll hear, I see a car in all different, it would be a very interesting round robin kind of situation. So you definitely want to make sure you have headphones for that. But similar concept, you can pre-build sentences or you could have your students do it on their own. They could practice this, they could add punctuation. That's a good extension. If you have students that have finished early, you're like, okay, what punctuation could you put there? And have them draw, it would be very simple for them to use the drawing tools to add a comma, add a period or an exclamation point, question marks, things like that. So that's a natural extension of that. And then, depending on their mouse control, you can do as much or as little for them as needed. You could have them, start from scratch and build their own and write a sentence. Maybe you write it up on the board for them, and then they can practice that control as well. Maybe you have a worksheet beforehand and they have to practice their handwriting first before they can get on to the program. And they can check that off with you and say, oh, you got it. It looks great. Your spelling's good. Make sure they're getting it as neat as possible. Have them write the sentence a few times by hand. So they're bringing in that unplugged activity as well. So that would be a good way to kind of incorporate that. And then once they've built their sentence in Scratch and they can add different words if they wanted, they can add, really expand it however you want. You could have them even code it with a background. So you could have them add, the setting of it. Where would you see a car? Would you see it on the moon? Would you see it? Where was it in the classroom driving? Where would you see this object? And then you could have them add the setting, add extra characters, add movement, really expand upon that and kind of that again, bringing that visual and linguistic connection. So, and this is great to incorporate kind of all areas of cross-curricular. You could, I see 2 cars, I see 10 cars. You could bring in a math component to it as well and make it so that you're bringing in that as well, or add, descriptive words. I see red cars, I see blue cars, parts of a sentence, nouns, verbs. You can really take this in any direction you want and expand upon it. And it's a very simple, easy to do activity that then can be applied in different ways. Maybe in science, your kindergartners are learning about weather. So you could say, okay, what kind of weather would it be in the winter? Where would you see it, make it a winter scene with a car? You can do all sorts of things to really make those connections. I think the more connections we make throughout across all areas that they're learning, the easier it becomes that recollection. They're hearing it, that repetition over and over again. Those connections are strengthened. So I think this is a great way to do that, and some creative. And if you have creative ideas of how you've used this lesson or how you think you can use this lesson, go ahead and throw those in the chat as well. I know for more advanced students, you can do poetry, code a poem, do things like that if you're more in the upper level of what grade levels you teach. And any of these ScratchJr ideas can also very easily be applied in Scratch as well. Often our lessons are complementary, so we'll have like a K2 ScratchJr lesson and then a complementary 3 through 5 similar concepts for the older kids as well. Oh, I like the sight words for kinders instead of a sentence. That could be great. Find the sight word. You could put a whole bunch of sight words up there and have them click, which one is this one? Or have them put them in a specific order. I love that instead of a sentence. So yeah, lots of really creative ways. And like, we mentioned, if mouse control is a problem, you can preload these and share them out with your students, which is a fantastic feature. I love that we just came out with that you can create your own, because then, your students, exactly what they need. And so that really unlocks a lot of creative options. So love this lesson. The next couple are actually my favorite way because I love fostering creativity. So this is create an original story. And this is where students love to just get as creative as they can. And you can put, as many guidelines for this as you would like, or let them get as creative as you would like. So I would recommend with this one, having it be more of a 2-day activity so that you have the unplugged section of it being a handout where they're planning out their story. So they're not just getting on and just creating whatever they want and going crazy, although there is time and place for that, and it's super fun to watch. I love doing that as like a reward activity after they finish their assignments. Let them, get as creative as they want, put a zebra on the moon, do what you want. But for this one, I think there's some benefit in slowing down a little bit and having a planning document that talks about, okay, what's the setting? What characters are you going to include? And this kind of helps them have that structure and keep them on task as well. And maybe, a couple of events that are going to happen. And this could be a fiction story. It could be a nonfiction. It could be something that actually happened to them. You could give it a theme such as, this was my favorite vacation that I've ever gone on, or this is my dream vacation that I would like to go on. Or you could give them a writing prompt, such as code a time where you were brave. You can kind of include some social emotional learning in there. Code a time where you're brave. Code a time where you overcame a fear you had. Code a time where you helped somebody, where you were kind and it made a difference in their life. So you can incorporate different areas into that as well. But really, I think it's beneficial to have that planning time and then ask them to very closely, as much as they can, follow their outline. And then they can do a self-reflection exercise afterwards of, okay, did I follow what changed? Did I follow my plan? What changed? Why did I change that? I think that's beneficial as well to add that reflection component. This can be done. So after, this might be a multi-day project and they'll probably have multiple pages of their project. The maximum is 4. So there is a cap there so they can kind of understand they can't go more than 4 pages in a ScratchJr project. but they can then incorporate elements. You can get into the coding part of it as well as a follow-up. Okay, so we have characters that need to appear or disappear. We have timing blocks that can kind of wait, make sure that things are happening in sequence. And then kind of the natural progression of things. They can have blocks that jump from pages back and forth. So things like that. So you can spend a lot of time on this, or a little bit of time if you don't give them as much. But what's neat about this project too is then as a class, this one's really fun to share, and students are so proud of sharing their projects. And they might be a little hesitant to share maybe like a writing prompt that they've done, but they're so excited to share their ScratchJr projects. So you can share it up on the smartboard if you have that. You can have them break into groups and kind of share their projects among that. You could have students have one student share and then have the other one write a summary of what was that story that they heard, and then switch roles. So there's lots of different ways you can incorporate that and make it fun and make it collaborative. I think this is one where collaboration lends really easily to that. So that's a great one for that. And then the next lesson, I mean, feel free to stop me if you have creative things that you want to throw in the chat. Go ahead and do that as well. Creative ways you've done this, incorporated storytelling. You can do that as well. Like I said, it might be hard for a student to write, a first grader to write out a story with 4 different scenes and a plot and things like that. But when we give them these visual tools, it somehow becomes a little more manageable, and they're able to do it that way. And they have fun customizing their sprites, things like that. So it gets really fun. The next lesson that I wanted to kind of talk about is kind of an extension of this. It could be, instead of creating their own, they're going to retell a story that maybe you've read in class. Maybe as a class you're reading The Wild Robot or something fun like that. That was my daughter's favorite book that she read this year. So you can read a story as a class. It can be a long story. Maybe you read the whole novel. Maybe it's a short story, and this can be a day, just a quick recap. You can make it however you want. But it helps them take those it helps them create a visual map kind of in their head of what happened, and then that sticks with them. So yeah, this one's very versatile. It's also a great, really informal assessment. So maybe you read a short story out loud and you ask your students, okay, can you recreate a scene that I read to you today? Can you show me what characters were there? What details do you remember? So it really encourages those retell skills, which are really important. This one here was the pout pout fish. That was another favorite. All my kids loved the pout pout fish growing up. I don't know, throw a heart out there if you liked the pout pout fish too, if you've heard of it. If you haven't heard of it, I recommend it. It's a really fun one to read through about, what's your attitude and what can change your attitude, and how it affects others around you. So really fun story. So in this one, we have a little sad fish. I just drew a little frowny face on my fish. Oh, you may be thinking of rainbow fish. Rainbow fish is another good one too. But pout pout fish has been my favorite. And they have a whole series of pout pout fish does this and that, and really fun. But so really quickly, the pout pout fish is talking to a crab, and he goes through, and the crab has this little thing about, you really shouldn't be so sad. And then in the end, the pout pout fish, turns his frown upside down. And it's really cute, but I won't spoil the ending. But anyway, really fun. So just a short story, and students can get on and code it really quick. There's some movements. They can add some dialogue. They can record the story. So maybe you give them a story and you ask them to record a page in it. There's lots of ways to do that. If you have a bigger story, you could break them into groups and have them work as a pair to each program a scene and then present it to the class in sequential order. And you could talk about sequencing there. Like, would it make sense if group 4 went first and we knew the ending before the story even started? So lots of great connection points there. It's just a really fun way to kind of incorporate those, reading skills and retell skills. So a really great way to do that as well. And then, yeah, you can make this as big a project or a smaller project. It can be a day thing. It can be a week-long thing that you're working on. Get as creative as they want with that. I would also recommend a planning sheet with this one as well, so that they don't just jump in and get lost and distracted by all the fun, shiny characters. So I would do a planning sheet and say, okay, what characters are you going to use? And you can do a printout, maybe print off a page that has the ScratchJr sprites and have them select circle. Okay, I'm going to do this one. I'm going to do this one. I'm going to choose this background and kind of do a planning sheet with it. And that can be really helpful to reduce kind of the being distracted when they jump in there. Storyboard, that's the word I'm looking for. Yes, storyboard it out. I think that's very helpful with any ScratchJr project you can do, so that then they kind of have that reminder of like, okay, here's where I'm going, here's where I'm supposed to be. So I think that's great. And then I know we're getting close to time, but I did just want to take a few minutes and just talk about it's okay if this does not go smoothly the first time you try it. None of us went to school to teach coding, right? So if you're jumping in and things aren't going smoothly at first, that's totally okay. Embrace that struggle. That's what Robin talked about, right? Helping our students embrace that struggle. Well, we as teachers can embrace that as well and kind of give ourselves some grace. I have had lessons that I'm like, wow, that did not go how I wanted it to go at all. And that's okay. And we can reflect back on that and learn from it. And our students can learn from it as well. And you say, okay, those reflection moments are always great. How would I do this differently? So I would just embrace learning with your students, and then also embrace their creativity and make it fun that way. I think it's awesome when this can be the most fun thing that they get on and they can unleash their creativity. So allowing time for that just free creativity as well is really important too. Maybe add some free time, get your project done. Okay, now do what you want, explore. How can you make this different? How can you change this? How could you change the ending of the story completely? How would you make the story go? Let them have that creative freedom as well. I think when we foster that, amazing things happen with our students and they love it. And it just it builds their confidence, it builds their excitement. I think wonderful things happen. So yeah, I want to kind of open it up for a minute or two. If you have any suggestions you want to share, collaboration is amazing. That's how I learned, is somebody, bouncing ideas off with me and like making it work. So if anybody has anything they'd love to share, you can go ahead and put that in the chat. We just have a few minutes left before we wrap up. But I just hope you get excited about this and incorporating it in your classroom, because it really is such a cool, wonderful thing to see and a great medium for students to express themselves. I have loved seeing it with my own children, with students. It's been great. Okay, so in the chat, I'm curious if anyone has used these strategies with reading intervention. I think that could be a great opportunity, to go through and kind of take the text that they're reading and kind of bring it visual. If anybody else has great strategies with that, I'd love to hear that as well. And then another suggestion was, for the first day of school, you can use this as a vision board. I love that. That would be great. Or about me poster. I've done that too, where you have them code something all about them. Rules, that's another thing I did. First day in my classroom, we coded the rules and they liked that. So, no running. So we had to use like the slow block because we're not going to run in the classroom. So there's lots of great ways that. Let's see. I'm a total person, so I appreciate these reading strategies. Awesome.
And Krista, we do have a question in the Q&A that perhaps you can also answer. For the lessons focused more on storytelling, what are the grade levels that you suggest?
So I think you can use it for any grade. It really is just those scaffolding abilities, because kindergartners can tell stories, right? So maybe a kindergartner's program is going to be very simple. It's going to be one page with one character, and that's fine. Who's the main character in the story? Can you identify the main character? And then if you get to a second grader, obviously they're going to have kind of some more ability to dive in a little deeper and understand kind of the plot more and add kind of some different sequences of events that happened. So I really think any grade level can do the story lessons. And maybe your storyboard is going to look a little different for a kindergartner. Maybe it's just them drawing a picture of it, and that's fine. Where your second grader is going to be a little more in depth.
Awesome. Thank you so